everybody, welcome to today's session, Make Requests That Get Heard. My name is Petro. I'm the founder of Teach Through Love, and in today's class I want to show you how to stop arguing, pleading, begging, and demanding and insisting with your kids on your limits, and instead show you how to build cooperation by enhancing how you listen and shifting what you perceive so that you can start to respond in ways that bring you closer to what you really want, and ways that encourage natural giving by creating opportunities for your kids to experience belonging and significance, which is really, really important to humans in general, but especially to kids. The number one goal of today's class will be to show you how to make more requests than you do demands. And I think the reason is simple, if not so obvious. It's that requests are more likely to be honored than demands because requests are made from a place of self-empowerment and self-awareness. They come from the heart, so they get heard. Whereas demands are often made from impatience, fear of not having our needs met, feeling out of control, feeling unheard. And being respectful, it automatically creates the psychological conditions that are necessary for kids to learn respect and consideration for others. And it also builds this motivation for them to actually contribute to the needs of other people. It doesn't take much to add to kids' motivation. A little bit of acknowledgement, some meaning and purpose, that goes a long way, but it's also really easy to reduce motivation in others by ignoring their efforts or by traditional uses of shame, blame, and guilt type discipline. So I want to veer us away from thinking about compliance and obedience when we're thinking about how do we make requests. How do we get our kids, because sometimes we'll think, how do we make requests that get heard? And that you might translate into, how do I get my kids to listen to me? And I want to go a little bit deeper than that. Now let me be clear that sometimes, yes, we have to make demands. There's times when there's limits and there's no negotiation, and maybe there's no natural giving that your kids are going to be willingly offering up in that moment. And, there's an actual firm limit that you have to hold as a parent. It's your responsibility to hold that limit. But a lot of the times those aren't the majority. A lot of the times life is just a learning experience. And also when we make those demands, we can set those limits without taking away love, attention, or things, if we choose to remain unoffended by our children's response to our limits. But what gets in our way is that in the hurried pace of our lives, we end up demanding a lot more often. And we demand not with respect and empathy, but with criticism or shame or blame or fear or guilt, or by taking things away from our kids. And what happens when we use those kinds of things? When people hear shame or criticism or fear, or they feel threatened, they lose that natural desire to give or to contribute, and they resort into a self-protective mode. And then what happens is our requests don't get heard and the listening gets shut down. So what do we do? How do we change? There's a couple of ways. Empathy. Empathy is about enhancing our listening. It's not just our communication and our nonverbal and verbal communication where we reflect our understanding, but it's really about transforming the way we listen. I read a great quote on Facebook the other day by a man who's a business consultant, and his name's Bix Bixen. And the quote said, "Listening is giving the other person the experience of being heard." And I just loved how simple and profound that was. It just summarized it so perfectly. Does my child feel heard? And am I aware that, maybe that tone wasn't so good, or maybe I should have made another choice of words? It's okay. It's okay to be that, but what does the other person experience? What am I experiencing? What are we experiencing together? And you may say, I listen to my child all the time. I want him to listen to me now. As parents, we often say that. We say, I want my child to listen more. But usually when we're saying that, what we really mean is that we want obedience, or we want immediate compliance. But if we want to develop self-discipline within our kids, we need to use emotionally intelligent discipline with them, and we need to let go of obedience as a goal. Doesn't mean that our kids don't listen to us or that we don't have expectations, but we let go of that as a goal, and we look to building skills, building relationship as the primary goal. Because let's face it, are you looking for an obedient adult who does what he's told and then who happens to suffer emotionally and physically because of that stress of not having an authentic voice? Or do you want to raise a child who grows up to be a driven, critically thinking adult who's motivated by internal forces within his character those internal forces which drive him to do the right thing, to be considerate of others, and to contribute to the needs of others by listening to their requests. Now, it can be scary to give up the idea of how we think it should go. And I want to be clear that I don't want you to give up limits, and I don't want you to give up setting boundaries or enforcing necessary rules. I only want you to let go of that biting criticism or those threats. Or maybe you're more of the pleading and begging type parent. So whatever kind of control trap you fall into, whether you're saying it really sweet but sort of desperate, or whether you're using a more authoritarian type tone with your kids. Either way, we don't want to use extremes. We want to move into this place where we're working together. And in order to make requests that get heard, we need to shift not only the way that we speak, but also the way that we listen, how we listen, and the perceptions of what we hear. What are we making out of what we are hearing from others? So let's talk about some examples of how to stay curious but not so focused on obedience as a goal. If we have a situation where we need to request that our children complete their homework before they go out to play, a traditional request might sound something like, I'd like you to finish your homework before you go out to play. There are no exceptions. You know that that's the rule. What we have here is we have a goal of obedience without regard for circumstances. And what it does is it shuts our kids down. Now, this may be the rule, but is it bringing us closer to getting that request heard, to getting that request acknowledged? What that probably does is it really shuts down our kids because we don't really leave any room for conversation. And if a child isn't doing homework, if they're resisting it, if they're procrastinating, there's probably something else going on that's preventing them from starting it. It may be overwhelming. They may not know where to begin. It may be that they actually do need to relax a little bit after a long day at school before they start on that homework. But if we just keep this rule of, I want you to do your homework, I need you to do your homework, you need to do your homework before you go out to play, it shuts us down. A more conscious response might sound something like, when I see that your homework is unfinished, I'm wondering what's keeping you from doing it. What's going on? This invites your child to share more about his experience, and you might find some really good information when kids start to relax and feel safe. They start to unload those feelings that have been stuffed down. As he calms down, he begins to share, and as he shares, his brain connects to those good-feeling hormones, which pave the way for more positive behaviors to follow. This doesn't mean that the limit changes. It just means that we're creating experiences for our kids to feel like they matter and feel like their choices are valued and that they can have an impact on their lives. Let's take another example. Maybe there's no television during the school week, and a traditional request might sound something like, you know that there's no TV during the school week, now shut it off and don't ask me again. Right? Seems really straightforward, simple, but what does it do? It kind of shuts down the conversation again. So a more conscious request might sound something like, when you turn on the TV during the school day, I know that you know that doesn't work, so I'm wondering what's going on. This opens up the conversation, right? Your child knows that the TV needs to go off, but he also hears that you're willing to investigate why he broke the rule. And maybe you say something like, I'm wondering if you're needing more choice in how you spend your afternoon. Or maybe you say, I'm wondering if you feel upset about not being able to watch the same shows as your friends. You may even see that connection was the need. Maybe it had nothing to do with the TV, but maybe a desire to relax or to feel good or to connect with someone after school. My next tip is to use clear, actionable language. You don't want to make requests that ask your child to feel or be in a certain way. If you ask them to be patient or just be happy, it implies judgment of how they feel now. And when your kids feel judged about how they feel now, that again creates a lot of stress and pressure. So you always want to make sure that your requests are clear. Make your requests an observable action. Know what you want your child to do so that you can tell him in clear language with logical reasons if necessary for the request. Instead of, I want you to be nice to your brother, you can say something like, I would like it if you would come and get me when you feel frustrated, or I would like you to take a deep breath when your brother takes your toys. It's important to learn to control our bodies because it doesn't help people know what we want when we hit. Or instead of, I want you to listen to me, How many times do I have to ask you to set the table? You can say, I would like you to set the forks and the napkins on the table around the dishes like we agreed, so that we can have them ready for dinner, which will be ready in just a few minutes. Now, I'm going to leave you with an exercise in practicing identifying how you can make requests that are imbued with courtesy and respect and share your true needs and feelings. And this is really about getting in touch with your own true feelings and needs about conflicts that you may have. So you have this worksheet in your activity handout. So what I want you to do is I want you to think of someone, this could be your child, a friend, a partner, someone who does something that you don't like. And I want you to think about their behavior, and I want you to write down one sentence to describe what it is they do that you do not like. Now remember to make this an observable fact. Make an observation that you can actually see or hear, a direct quote or something that you can actually name as an action. You don't want to say, my child never listens. You want to say something like, when I ask my child to shut off the TV, he sits on the floor and doesn't turn around and look at me. Make it really clear to yourself so that you can practice writing non-judgmental observations. Then I want you to think about that behavior that you just described, and I want you to imagine that you are seeing and hearing it right now, and then write down what feelings come up when you think about this particular behavior that you don't like. The third step is I want you to think about this person's behavior again and then investigate what needs might be connected to the feelings that you just identified. What's missing from your experience? Write down a couple of needs that are going on. It's really important to identify what your needs are so that you can separate them from the actions that you want your child to take. Because when you want to make requests, you want to make sure that you're making requests by sharing your needs and then sharing your preferences. I have a need for order. It would be really helpful to me if you could pick up all the Matchbox cars off the floor instead of just clean up your room. Now, in the fourth step, I want you to practice writing down a request. I want you to think about what you would like that person to do that would help you meet your need, which you just identified, and write down a conscious request. And then practice this throughout the week with your kids. Please remember, it is always about consciousness, not perfection. Don't get down on yourself. If you have trouble with this at first, it takes time to develop this kind of communication with our kids. And it takes time sometimes to let go of the need for obedience. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with your kids. Take care, everybody, and make it a great one.